My son refused to help when my car broke down, so I sold the vacation property he used every summer. Yes, I actually did this, and while some people in my life think I went too far, I don't regret my decision for a second. When your own child, who you've given everything to, can't be bothered to help you in an emergency, but still expects to enjoy the fruits of your labor, sometimes a harsh lesson is the only way forward. If you enjoy stories about entitled family members getting exactly what they deserve, make sure to like and subscribe because this channel is dedicated to people standing up for themselves when others try to take advantage. It was a bitterly cold January evening when my car broke down on a rural stretch of highway about 30 miles from home. The temperature had dropped to 15 degrees, and darkness was falling quickly as I sat there, a 67-year-old man with arthritis flaring up in my hands, trying desperately to get my car started again. I'd been returning from visiting an old friend in the hospital when the engine suddenly died, leaving me stranded in a spot with barely any cell service. I tried calling roadside assistance, but the connection kept dropping before I could complete the call. In desperation, I called my son, Marcus, who lived just 10 minutes from where I was stranded. When he answered, I could hear loud music and laughter in the background. "Dad, what's up?" He sounded annoyed that I'd interrupted whatever party he was having. "Marcus, my car broke down on Highway 16, about 5 miles past the Miller Creek exit. I'm stranded, it's freezing, and I can't get through to roadside assistance. Could you please come help me?" There was a pause, and I heard him cover the phone and say something to someone else before he came back on the line. "Dad, I'm kind of in the middle of something important right now. Can't you call someone else? What about your neighbor, Tom?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Tom is 80 years old and doesn't drive at night anymore. "Marcus, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't an emergency. I'm your father, and I need help." He sighed dramatically. "Look, I've got people over, we're watching the game, and I've had a few beers already. Just call an Uber or something." "An Uber? Out here? There's no service for miles, and I can't leave my car on the highway." "Marcus, please." "Dad, you're always doing this, creating emergencies and expecting everyone to drop everything for you. Figure it out yourself for once. I've got to go." And with that, he hung up on me. His own father, stranded in freezing weather, and he couldn't be bothered to pause his party for 30 minutes to help. As I sat there in disbelief, I thought about the lakeside vacation property I'd purchased 20 years ago, the one that Marcus and his family used every summer for free. The one that I maintained year-round and paid taxes on, while he enjoyed it without contributing a dime. The property that he'd been bringing his friends to since college, treating it like his own personal resort. That was the moment I decided things needed to change. To understand why my son's betrayal cut so deeply, you need to know our history. I've always been a hardworking man who believed in providing for my family. After Marcus's mother died from cancer when he was just 12, it was just the two of us. I worked 2 jobs, my regular position as an accountant during the week and weekend shifts at a local hardware store, to ensure he never went without. Despite my exhaustion, I never missed his baseball games or school events. I wanted him to feel secure even though we'd lost the most important person in our lives. When Marcus got accepted to State University, I was beyond proud. Though I hadn't been able to save as much as I'd hoped for his education, I was determined he wouldn't start adult life burdened with debt. I took out a second mortgage on our modest home to cover his tuition, which amounted to $87,000 over 4 years. I never complained about this sacrifice. It was worth it to see him graduate with honors and land a good job at a marketing firm. 2 years after his graduation, when Marcus met Diane, I welcomed her into our family with open arms. They dated for 3 years before deciding to get married. When they announced their engagement, they talked about their dream wedding, but mentioned they'd need to scale back due to costs. Without hesitation, I offered to help. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime event," I told them. "Let's make it special." I contributed $35,000 toward their wedding, nearly emptying my personal savings. After the wedding, when they were struggling to save for a down payment on their first home, I again stepped in, giving them $25,000 to help them qualify for a better mortgage rate. I told them it was an early inheritance, money they wouldn't need to repay. I lived modestly so they could have security and comfort. The lakeside vacation property came into our lives somewhat unexpectedly. 20 years ago, my brother and I jointly inherited a sum of money from our uncle. My brother used his share to travel, while I decided to invest in something that could benefit my family for generations. I found a small but charming two-bedroom cabin on Lake Pinewood, about 3 hours from the city. It wasn't luxurious, just a simple wooden structure on a beautiful plot of land with 80 feet of lakefront. I paid $120,000 for it, which seemed like a fortune to me at the time. Over the years, I personally renovated that cabin, spending weekends and vacation time installing a new kitchen, building a dock, and adding a screened porch. My retirement funds went into maintaining the property rather than exotic vacations or a new car. I kept driving my old sedan year after year, putting off repairs and replacements so I could keep the cabin in good condition. Every improvement was made with Marcus and his future family in mind. When Marcus was in college, the cabin became party central for him and his friends during summer breaks. I didn't mind. I was happy the place brought him joy. After he married Diane and they had their twins, Emma and Ethan, now 10 years old, the cabin became their summer tradition. They would spend 3 weeks there every July, and Marcus would often bring business associates for weekend retreats in August and September. I rarely used it myself anymore, as my arthritis made the upkeep challenging, but I continued paying the annual property taxes of $3,800 and maintenance costs, averaging about $5,000 per year. The property had appreciated significantly over time, now worth approximately $380,000 due to the renovations and the increasing desirability of lakefront property in the area. Despite this, Marcus never offered to contribute to its upkeep or taxes. When the roof needed replacing 2 years ago, a $12,000 expense, he suggested I take out a home equity loan rather than offering to help with the cost. Our relationship had been strained for the past few years. As Marcus's career flourished and his income surpassed mine, he seemed to forget the sacrifices I'd made. He and Diane lived in a beautiful 4,000-square-foot home in an exclusive neighborhood, took luxury vacations twice a year, and the twins attended private school. Meanwhile, I continued living in the same modest 3-bedroom house where Marcus grew up, carefully managing my retirement income. The dynamic shifted subtly at first. Marcus began canceling our weekly dinners, always with plausible excuses, work deadlines, the kids' activities, social obligations. When we did get together, he would check his phone constantly or steer conversations toward complaints about his stressful life. He never asked about my health concerns or how I was managing on my own. Last Thanksgiving, I overheard him talking to Diane in the kitchen while I was in the hallway. "Dad's place is so depressing," he said. "I don't know why he doesn't just sell it and move into one of those senior communities. It's embarrassing bringing clients anywhere near that neighborhood." I pretended not to hear, but his words stung deeply. The home he found depressing was the one where I'd raised him alone, the one I'd leveraged to pay for his education. I said nothing, not wanting to create tension during the holidays. Christmas was even worse. I'd saved for months to buy thoughtful gifts for everyone, particularly special art supplies for Emma, who showed real talent, and a telescope for science-loving Ethan. Marcus and Diane gave me a generic gift card to a department store. When I opened it, Marcus said, "We figured you could use it to update some of your things," glancing dismissively at my well-worn sweater. Despite these slights, I continued making myself available whenever they needed help. I watched the twins when Marcus and Diane wanted weekend getaways. I helped them with yard work when they entertained clients. I never asked for anything in return because that's what family does. They support each other unconditionally. Or at least, that's what I believed until that freezing January night when my car broke down and my own son couldn't be bothered to help me. After Marcus hung up on me that night, I sat in my cold car for another 20 minutes before finally getting a connection to roadside assistance. They told me it would be at least 2 hours before anyone could reach me. As I waited, shivering despite layering all the clothes I had in the car, I called my neighbor Tom. The 80-year-old Marcus had dismissed as an option. When I explained my situation, Tom immediately said, "I'll find someone to help you, Richard. Don't worry." 30 minutes later, Tom's grandson Kyle arrived with jumper cables and tools. When that didn't work, he drove me home and arranged for a tow truck to collect my car the next day. Kyle refused to take any money for his help, saying, "Grandpa told me how you helped him fix his roof last summer." That's what neighbors do. The contrast between my elderly neighbor's response and my own son's couldn't have been more stark. The next morning, I called Marcus, thinking perhaps he'd realized his mistake and would apologize. He answered on the fourth ring, sounding groggy. "Hey Dad, what's up?" "I wanted to let you know I got home safely last night, in case you were worried," I said, giving him an opportunity to express concern. "Oh, good," he replied flatly. "I figured you'd sort it out. Kyle, Tom's grandson, came to help me. The car needed to be towed. See? You found someone. I told you you'd figure it out." There wasn't a hint of remorse in his voice. "Marcus, I was stranded in freezing temperatures for nearly an hour. I could have developed hypothermia." He sighed. "Dad, you're being dramatic. You were in a car, not exposed to the elements. Besides, I told you I had people over and had been drinking. Would you rather I drove impaired? You could have called me a taxi, or asked one of your friends to drive you, or even just called to check on me later. You did nothing. Look, I'm sorry you're upset, but I'm not going to feel guilty about this. You need to be more self-sufficient and stop expecting everyone to drop everything when you have a problem." His tone was dismissive, as if I were a child being scolded. Self-sufficient? Marcus, do you realize how insulting that is? I raised you alone, put you through college, helped buy your first house. Here we go again, he interrupted. Every conversation somehow circles back to everything you've done for me. That's what parents are supposed to do, Dad. You don't get special credit for fulfilling your basic responsibilities. I was stunned into silence. Basic responsibilities? Emptying my savings and taking out a second mortgage were basic responsibilities? Anyway, he continued, oblivious to the pain he was causing, Diane and I were talking about the lake house. We want to use it for the whole month of July this year, and maybe some weekends in June too. Her sister's family might join us for a week. That's not a problem, right? The audacity was breathtaking. He couldn't be bothered to help me in an emergency, but he felt entitled to dictate terms about using my property. Actually, Marcus, I think we need to discuss the cabin. You've been using it for years without contributing to its upkeep or taxes. Are you seriously nickel-and-diming me right now? That place has been a family property for decades. You always said it would be mine someday anyway. Yes, someday. But right now, it's my property and maintaining it is expensive. If you want to use it this summer, I think it's reasonable that you contribute to its costs. Contribute? He sounded genuinely shocked. Dad, you know we have the twins' private school tuition and we're saving for their college funds. We can't just throw money at a vacation property we use a few weeks a year. You seem to have money for luxury vacations to Europe and the Caribbean, I pointed out. Last year alone, you spent more on vacations than I spent on maintaining the cabin. That's different. Those are experiences we've saved for. The cabin has always been free for family use. You've never asked for money before. I'm asking now. If you want to use the cabin this summer, I think $500 per week would be fair. That's still much less than you'd pay to rent a comparable property. There was a long silence before Marcus replied, his voice cold. This is really disappointing, Dad. I never thought you'd try to profit off your own family. It's not profit, Marcus. It's asking you to contribute to something you benefit from. That's what family does. They support each other. Yeah, well, family also doesn't abandon each other on the side of the road. But here we are, I said, finally addressing his betrayal directly. Oh my God, he exploded. Are you seriously holding the cabin hostage because I couldn't drop everything to come to your rescue last night? This is exactly why I couldn't come, because every interaction with you comes with strings attached and guilt trips. There were no strings attached to the $87,000 I spent on your education, or the $35,000 for your wedding, or the $25,000 for your house down payment, I replied quietly. There were no guilt trips when you and your college friends trashed the cabin that time and I spent a week repairing the damage without saying a word to you about it. That was years ago. Are you keeping a ledger of everything you've ever done for me? That's sick, Dad. Really sick. The conversation deteriorated from there. Marcus accused me of emotional manipulation, of trying to control him through money, of being bitter about his success. When I suggested he seemed to have forgotten the values I'd tried to instill in him about family loyalty and gratitude, he laughed derisively. Loyalty? That's rich coming from you. Where was your loyalty to mom when she was dying and you were always working instead of being with her? That cruel, unfounded accusation felt like a physical blow. I had taken family leave to be with his mother every day during her final months. I had held her hand as she took her last breath while 16-year-old Marcus was at a friend's house, having refused to come to the hospital that day because it was too depressing. I think we should end this conversation before one of us says something truly unforgivable, I said, my voice shaking. Fine by me. And you know what? Keep your cabin. We'll find somewhere else to vacation this summer. Somewhere without all this emotional baggage. After he hung up, I sat motionless in my living room for a long time. The son I had sacrificed everything for had become a stranger to me, a cold, entitled man who saw my generosity not as love, but as an obligation. Somewhere along the way, I had failed him as a father. I had given him everything except, perhaps, the understanding of what it means to be grateful and kind. That evening, I received a text from Diane. Marcus told me about your conversation. I'm sorry things got heated, but you need to understand we have our own financial priorities now. The kids were really looking forward to the lake this summer. Please reconsider your position on this. Family shouldn't charge family. I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled out all my files related to the cabin, the deed, tax records, insurance documents, and maintenance receipts from the past 20 years. The total I had spent on a property that primarily benefited Marcus and his family was staggering, over $240,000 including the purchase price, taxes, insurance, and improvements. 2 days later, Marcus called again. His tone was conciliatory, clearly having realized he'd gone too far. Dad, I've been thinking about our conversation. I'm sorry things got so intense. I shouldn't have brought Mom into it, that was low. But I still think you're being unreasonable about the cabin. I appreciate the apology, I said stiffly. So, about this summer. Diane already requested time off work, and the kids are counting on our lake vacation. Can we just go back to the way things were? I promise we'll leave the place spotless this time. The way things were, I repeated slowly. You mean where I pay for everything and you enjoy the benefits without acknowledgement or gratitude? Come on, Dad. Of course we're grateful. It's just unexpected to suddenly be asked to pay for something that's always been free. It feels like you're punishing me for one mistake. One mistake? Marcus, refusing to help your father in an emergency isn't just one mistake. It's a revelation of character. You're really not going to let this go, are you? His conciliatory tone was rapidly disappearing. Actually, I've made a decision about the cabin, I said calmly. I'm going to sell it. What? He shouted. You can't be serious. That cabin has been in our family for 20 years. What about all our memories there? What about the kids? The kids who I barely see anymore, despite living 30 minutes away? The ones who haven't visited their grandfather in 3 months because their parents are too busy. That's not fair. We have full lives, Dad. The kids have activities, we have work. And I have decisions to make about my property, I interrupted. I'm getting older, Marcus. Maintaining the cabin is becoming more difficult every year. The money from the sale will help secure my retirement, so I won't have to rely on a son who can't even be bothered to help in an emergency. This is insane. You're making a permanent decision based on temporary emotions. You're going to regret this. Perhaps, I acknowledged. But it's my decision to make. Fine, he snapped. Sell it if that's what you want. But don't expect us to pretend everything's normal afterward. You're destroying a family tradition out of spite. After he hung up, Diane called, then texted, then emailed, each communication escalating in desperation and emotional appeals. She even had the twins call me, clearly coached to say how much they loved the lake house and how sad they would be never to go there again. It was manipulative and only strengthened my resolve. The situation came to a head at a family dinner the following Sunday. I had invited Marcus, Diane, and the twins over, hoping we could discuss things calmly. I had prepared all their favorite foods, wanting to create a warm atmosphere despite the tension. Initially, the conversation remained superficial, discussion of the twins' school projects, Diane's work challenges, the unseasonably warm weather. But after dinner, when the kids were watching TV in the living room, Marcus brought up the cabin. Dad, we need to talk about what you're doing, he began, his tone reasonable but with an underlying current of anger. Selling the cabin isn't just about you, it affects all of us. That place holds 20 years of family memories. I understand that, I said. But maintaining it has become increasingly difficult for me, both physically and financially. Then let us help, Diane interjected. We could contribute something each year toward the taxes or maintenance. That's what I suggested on the phone, I reminded them. Marcus rejected the idea outright. I was upset. Marcus defended himself. You blindsided me with charges for something that's always been free. But we're willing to discuss a reasonable arrangement now. A reasonable arrangement, I repeated. And what would that look like to you? Marcus and Diane exchanged glances before he answered. We could pay, say, $1,000 a year toward the property taxes. And maybe help with some maintenance projects when we're there during the summer. I almost laughed at the insulting offer. The annual costs ran close to $9,000, and they were offering about 11% of that while still expecting exclusive use during the prime summer months. That's not even close to a fair contribution, Marcus. And it doesn't address the larger issue here. What larger issue? Diane asked, seeming genuinely confused. The issue of respect and gratitude, I said simply. When I was stranded on that highway, I needed my son. Not just anyone, my son. The person I've sacrificed for his entire life. And he couldn't be bothered to help me. I've apologized for that, Marcus said through gritted teeth. What more do you want? Should I grovel? Should I self-flagellate because I made one mistake? I want you to understand why your refusal hurt so deeply, I explained. It wasn't just about that night. It was about realizing that somewhere along the way, you've come to see everything I do for you as an entitlement rather than a gift given with love. That's not true, he protested, but his eyes slid away from mine. Isn't it? You use the cabin every summer without contributing a dime. You expect me to babysit the twins whenever you need a break. You accept financial help when it's offered, but never think to ask how I'm managing on my fixed income. When was the last time you called just to check on me, Marcus? Not because you needed something, but just because you cared. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Diane looked down at her hands while Marcus stared at me defiantly. So this is emotional blackmail, he finally said. Sell the cabin unless we start performing according to your standards of gratitude. No, Marcus. I'm selling the cabin regardless. What I'm asking for can't be bought or negotiated. I'm asking you to reflect on the kind of son, the kind of man you've become. The kind of man who provides well for his family? Who works 60-hour weeks to give his children opportunities? Who's respected in his community and profession? Yeah, I'm really failing at life, Dad. His voice dripped with sarcasm. Material success means nothing if you've lost your compassion and sense of family obligation along the way, I said quietly. Family obligation? He laughed bitterly. Like the obligation you're fulfilling by selling a property that was supposed to be our family legacy? That the twins have grown up spending their summers at? That cabin was the one place where we all connected as a family, and you're taking it away because of one phone call I didn't answer. I shook my head sadly. If that cabin was truly the only place we connected as a family, then we've already lost something far more valuable than property. This conversation is pointless, Marcus stood up abruptly. You've already made up your mind. You're punishing all of us, including your grandchildren, to teach me some twisted lesson. Well, congratulations. Lesson received. Marcus, Diane put her hand on his arm, but he shook it off. No, I'm done. Dad wants to sell the cabin? Fine. Let him sell it. But he should understand what he's really selling along with it. He stormed into the living room and told the twins to get their coats. They looked confused and disappointed. We usually had dessert and played board games after dinner. But they obeyed, giving me quick hugs before being ushered out by their father. Diane lingered behind for a moment. Richard, please reconsider. Marcus is too proud to say it, but this is breaking his heart. That cabin, it's where he feels closest to his mother's memory. It's where he taught the twins to swim, where we celebrated our 5th anniversary. It means everything to him. Her words gave me pause. I hadn't considered that Marcus might associate the cabin with memories of his mother, who had never actually seen the property. But I also couldn't ignore the cruel dismissal when I needed him most. I'm sorry, Diane. My decision stands. The cabin has become a symbol of a one-sided relationship that isn't healthy for any of us. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is force a reset. As she left to join Marcus and the twins in the car, I felt a profound sadness, but also a strange sense of peace. For the first time in decades, I was making a decision based solely on what was right for me, not what would make Marcus happy. The next morning, I contacted a real estate agent who specialized in lakefront properties. Sarah McDonald had an excellent reputation and had recently sold several cabins in the Lake Pinewood area. We arranged to meet at the property the following weekend. When I arrived at the cabin, I was struck by the memories it held: Marcus learning to fish off the dock, the twins building their first sandcastle on our little beach, countless sunset conversations on the porch. For a moment, I questioned my decision. Was I really willing to part with this piece of our family history? But then I remembered Marcus's cold voice on the phone that January night. "Figure it out yourself for once," he'd said, as if I had spent a lifetime burdening him rather than supporting him. The pain of that moment hardened my resolve. Sarah was impressed by the property's condition and location. "Waterfront properties like this, especially with the improvements you've made, are in high demand," she explained. "I think we could list it for $395,000 and expect significant interest." That figure was higher than I'd anticipated, a testament to both the care I'd put into the property and the rising market for vacation homes. I signed the listing agreement that day. When I returned home, there was a message from Marcus on my answering machine. His tone was conciliatory, almost pleading. "Dad, I've been thinking about our conversation. Maybe I was too hasty. Can we talk about a more substantial contribution for using the cabin? Please call me back." I didn't return his call immediately. Instead, I made an appointment with my financial advisor, Harold, who had helped me manage my modest investments for years. "Selling the cabin is a significant decision," Harold said when we met. "But from a purely financial perspective, it makes sense at your stage of life. The proceeds could substantially increase your retirement security." We discussed various options for the anticipated $370,000 to $380,000 I would clear after commissions and taxes. Harold recommended a conservative investment approach that would generate additional monthly income while preserving the principal. This could add approximately $1,500 to $1,800 to your monthly income, he explained. "That's significant considering your current situation." He was right. My retirement income from Social Security and my small pension totaled just under $3,000 per month. The additional income from investing the cabin proceeds would dramatically improve my financial security and quality of life. I also consulted with my attorney, Judith Brennan, about updating my will. Previously, I had planned to leave the cabin to Marcus and the remainder of my estate to be divided between him and the twins' education funds. With the cabin being sold, I needed to reconsider my estate planning. "Given the situation with your son, you might want to consider establishing direct trusts for your grandchildren's education and future needs," Judith suggested. "That would ensure the funds are used as you intend." I agreed with her recommendation. We set up educational trusts for Emma and Ethan that would cover their college expenses and perhaps graduate school, depending on their choices. The remainder of my estate would still go to Marcus, but the largest asset, the cabin, would be converted to funds that directly benefited his children rather than him. As these plans progressed, Marcus continued calling, each message more urgent than the last. Finally, I returned his call. "Dad, I've been trying to reach you for days," he said, a note of panic in his voice. "Have you really listed the cabin?" "Yes, Marcus. Sarah McDonald has the listing. She's already scheduled an open house for next weekend." "This is happening too fast," he protested. "We haven't had a chance to really discuss this as a family." "We discussed it at dinner. Your position was quite clear." I was upset. People say things they don't mean when they're upset. "Can't we just sit down and talk about this rationally?" "I am being rational, Marcus. The cabin costs me nearly $9,000 a year to maintain, money that would significantly improve my retirement if invested properly. I'm 67 years old with arthritis that makes maintenance increasingly difficult. And the person who benefits most from the property couldn't be bothered to help me when I was stranded on a freezing highway. Those are rational reasons for selling. Look, Diane and I have talked, and we're willing to take over all the maintenance costs. All of them. You won't have to pay a dime or lift a finger. We'll handle everything." His offer came too late. The listing agreement is signed, Marcus. And frankly, this sudden generosity only reinforces my decision. You're willing to contribute now that you're at risk of losing your free vacation spot, but not when your father simply needed help. That's not fair. I made one mistake. No, Marcus. You revealed your true character in a moment of crisis. That's not a mistake. It's a revelation. After more heated exchanges, Marcus finally played what he thought was his trump card. Fine. If you're determined to sell, I'll buy it from you. Market value, no discounts asked. I was momentarily taken aback by his offer. You'd pay $395,000 for the cabin? If that's what it takes to keep it in the family, yes. We have some savings, and we can get a vacation home mortgage for the rest. For a brief moment, I considered his offer. If his commitment to the property was strong enough that he'd take on such a significant financial obligation, perhaps there was hope for our relationship after all. But then a troubling thought occurred to me. Marcus, you balked at contributing $500 a week toward maintenance, but now you're willing to take on a mortgage that would cost at least $2,000 a month, plus all the taxes and maintenance costs? It's different when you own something, he said defensively. It's an investment then, not just throwing money away. And there it was, the fundamental problem in our relationship laid bare. My decades of financial sacrifice and personal labor were throwing money away in his eyes, while his ownership would be an investment. My generosity had never been valued because it came without price tags or conditions. I'm sorry, Marcus, but I've already accepted an offer on the property. What? How's that possible? It was just listed. Sarah had several clients who had been looking for waterfront property on Lake Pinewood for months. One of them made an offer sight unseen, contingent only on a satisfactory inspection. This wasn't entirely true. Sarah had mentioned such clients, but no offer had yet materialized. However, I needed to end this cycle of emotional manipulation. You can't do this, Marcus's voice cracked. That cabin is part of our family history. The history I remember includes 20 years of me maintaining a property that primarily benefited you and your family, with no appreciation or contribution from your side. That's not a history I wish to continue. After Marcus hung up, I called Sarah to inform her that under no circumstances was she to entertain any offers from my son or daughter-in-law, even if they came through another agent. She was surprised, but agreed to respect my wishes. Within 2 weeks, we did receive a legitimate offer from a couple in their 40s with 3 young children. They had been searching for a lakefront property for over a year and fell in love with the cabin during the open house. Their offer of $387,000 was very close to the asking price, and they were pre-approved for financing. After a brief negotiation, we settled on $392,000. The day after I accepted their offer, I received a detailed email from Marcus. It listed all the reasons I should reconsider, including a 5-year plan for how he and Diane would gradually take over all cabin expenses. The email concluded with, "If you go through with this sale, you're not just selling property, you're selling out our family tradition and breaking your grandchildren's hearts." Is that really the legacy you want to leave? I didn't respond. 3 days later, I received another message, this one from Diane, with the subject line, "The children are devastated." It included pictures of Emma and Ethan at the lake from previous summers, with a note saying, "These memories mean everything to them. Please don't take away their special place." The emotional manipulation was transparent and only strengthened my resolve. I proceeded with the sale, meeting all contingencies and working toward a smooth closing. The inspection revealed a few minor issues, which I addressed promptly. The appraisal came in at $389,000, validating our agreed price. Throughout this process, Marcus continued his campaign to change my mind. He enlisted family friends to call me, had his in-laws express their disappointment, and even arranged for a surprise visit from the twins, who arrived with hand-drawn pictures of the cabin and tearful pleas to save our lake house. It was the most emotionally manipulative tactic yet, using children as pawns, and it backfired spectacularly. I sat the twins down and gently explained, "I love you both very much, and I always will. The cabin has given us wonderful memories, but it's time for another family to make their memories there." With the money from selling the cabin, I'll be able to do other special things with you, like perhaps taking you on a trip to Disney World next year." Their tears dried quickly at the mention of Disney World, revealing just how superficial their devastation had been. Before they left, I had a private word with Diane, expressing my disappointment in their using the children this way. "I would never have expected you to manipulate Emma and Ethan like this," I told her quietly. "They're children, not emotional weapons." Diane had the grace to look ashamed. "It wasn't my idea," she admitted. "Marcus is desperate. He really thought seeing their faces would change your mind. And that's exactly why I'm proceeding with the sale," I replied. "A healthy family doesn't use children as pawns in adult disagreements." 30 days after accepting the offer, we closed on the property. I received a check for $392,000, less the commission and closing costs, leaving me with approximately $368,000. As planned, I met with Harold to invest the proceeds in a conservative portfolio designed to generate monthly income while preserving the principal. When Marcus learned the sale had been finalized, he sent a scathing text message: "Congratulations. You've sold off 20 years of family memories for cash. I hope it was worth it." I didn't respond. Instead, I scheduled an appointment with Judith to finalize the educational trusts for Emma and Ethan. Each trust would receive $100,000, which, with conservative growth, should provide a significant contribution to their college expenses when they reach that age. The remaining funds went into my retirement investments, with a portion set aside for some modest improvements to my home that I'd been putting off for years. The first distribution from my new investments arrived exactly when Marcus called with yet another crisis. His voice was tense as he explained that his car needed expensive repairs, and with Diane's recent job transition, they were temporarily short on cash. "I hate to ask, Dad, but could you help us out? It would just be a loan until Diane's first paycheck comes through. Maybe $3,000. In the past, I would have transferred the money immediately, no questions asked. This time, I paused before responding. "I'm sorry to hear about your car troubles, Marcus. That must be stressful with everything else going on. So you'll help?" The relief in his voice was palpable. "No, I don't think I will," I said calmly. "You have a home equity line of credit you can tap, or you could use one of your credit cards temporarily. You're resourceful. I'm sure you'll figure it out yourself." The silence on the other end of the line was profound. I had thrown his own words back at him, and we both knew it. "Wow," he finally said. "You're really committed to this revenge thing, aren't you? Selling the cabin wasn't enough. This isn't about revenge, Marcus. It's about recalibrating our relationship. For too long, I've been the giver and you've been the taker. That dynamic isn't healthy for either of us. So now, when I need help for the first time in years, you turn your back on me? That's your idea of a healthy relationship. I seem to recall needing help on a freezing January night, and you turned your back on me. Perhaps we're both learning important lessons about reciprocity." He hung up without another word. Later that week, I learned from a mutual friend that Marcus had indeed tapped his home equity line to cover the car repairs, a financial option that had always been available to him, though apparently less appealing than asking his father for money. 3 months after selling the cabin, I used a small portion of my new investment income to fulfill a longtime dream, a 2-week photography workshop in Yellowstone National Park. It was something I'd wanted to do for years, but had always put off, prioritizing cabin maintenance and family obligations instead. The experience was transformative. I connected with other retirees who shared my interests, developed a new skill that brought me joy, and experienced the majesty of one of America's natural treasures. I returned home with hundreds of photographs, a renewed sense of purpose, and several new friendships. I shared some of my photos on social media, where many old friends and family members commented on how happy and revitalized I looked. My brother called to say he hadn't seen me looking so well in years. "Selling that cabin was the best thing you could have done," he told me. "I've been watching you pour money and energy into it for decades, while Marcus treated it like his personal resort. I never said anything because it wasn't my place, but I'm glad you finally stood up for yourself." My neighbor Tom was equally supportive. "You gave that boy everything, Richard, and somewhere along the way, he stopped appreciating it. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to stop enabling their worst behavior." During this period, communication with Marcus was minimal. He sent obligatory texts on my birthday and Father's Day, but declined my invitations to dinner. The twins, however, still visited occasionally, dropped off by Diane, who remained polite but distant. 6 months after the sale, Marcus's company underwent a significant restructuring, and he found himself unexpectedly unemployed. I learned this not from him, but from a family friend who thought I should know. Despite our strained relationship, I was concerned. I called to check on him, but the conversation was brief and tense. "We're fine," he insisted. "I've got prospects and we have savings. We don't need your help." I didn't call to offer financial help, Marcus. I called because I care about how you're doing. "Right," he said skeptically. "Just like you cared when you sold our family cabin." It seemed there was still no getting through to him. I ended the call by saying, "When you're ready to have a real conversation, I'm here." 2 more months passed. I continued enjoying my retirement with new activities and friends, while setting aside regular time to spend with Emma and Ethan. I took them to museums, sporting events, and once to a photography exhibition where I had 3 pictures on display. They seemed to enjoy these outings, though they were careful never to mention them to their father. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Marcus showed up at my door unannounced. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes and a humility in his posture I hadn't seen in years. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. I stepped aside to let him enter. We sat in the living room, the same room where we'd had our confrontation about the cabin months earlier. For a while, neither of us spoke. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. "I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few months. Losing my job, it was a wake-up call. I had to reevaluate a lot of things." I nodded, but didn't interrupt. "When I was first laid off, I was angry at everyone, my boss, the company, even you. But then I had to start asking myself some hard questions about why I felt so entitled to certain things." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I realized I've been taking a lot for granted, including you." "That's a difficult realization," I acknowledged. "Yeah, especially when you look back and see a pattern stretching years." He met my eyes directly for the first time. "I was awful to you that night when your car broke down. There's no excuse for it." And instead of apologizing sincerely, I doubled down and made everything worse. "Yes, you did," I agreed, not making this easier for him, but not being unnecessarily harsh either. "When you sold the cabin, I was furious. I convinced myself you were being petty and vindictive. But with some distance and perspective, I get it now. Why should you keep pouring money into something that only benefited me when I couldn't even help you in an emergency?" He shook his head. "I wouldn't have helped me either." I felt a weight lifting from my chest, the weight of being misunderstood by my own son for so long. "Thank you for saying that, Marcus. I'm not just saying it. I mean it." He took a deep breath. "I've been talking to a therapist since losing my job. She's helped me see how entitled my behavior has been, not just with you, but in other areas of my life too. I had this idea that because I worked hard and provided for my family, everyone else should accommodate my needs and wants. That's a common misconception," I said gently. "Maybe, but it's not an excuse." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Dad, I'm truly sorry. Not just for that night, but for years of taking your generosity for granted. For making you feel like an ATM instead of my father. For not showing you the respect and appreciation you deserve." His apology was more comprehensive and self-aware than I had expected. I could see the genuine remorse in his eyes and hear it in his voice. "I accept your apology, Marcus. And I appreciate your honesty." "There's more," he continued. "I found a new job last week. It's not as prestigious as my last position, and the pay is about 30% less, but it's stable and the company culture seems healthier. Diane has also gone back to work full-time. We've had to make some lifestyle adjustments. We're selling the house and moving to a smaller place. The kids will transfer to public school next year, but it's actually been good for all of us to reassess our priorities." "Those are significant changes," I observed. "How are you all handling it?" "Better than I expected," he admitted. "The twins are resilient, and Diane has been amazing. She never reproached me, just rolled up her sleeves and helped figure out solutions." He smiled slightly. "She told me later she'd been unhappy with our lifestyle for years, the pressure to keep up appearances, the constant striving for more. She said this reset feels like a relief in many ways. Diane's always been sensible, I noted. Yes, she has. Marcus hesitated before continuing. There's something else I need to tell you. When we were going through our finances to figure out our new budget, I really looked at our spending for the first time in years. And I was ashamed, Dad. Truly ashamed. We spent over $40,000 on vacations last year while you were driving a 15-year-old car and putting off replacing your furnace. I hadn't told him about the furnace issues, which made his observation all the more meaningful. He'd actually been paying attention to my circumstances for once. I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty about selling the cabin, I clarified. That decision was as much about my financial security as it was about our relationship. I know, and you made the right call. If our positions were reversed, I'd have done the same thing much sooner. He smiled ruefully. Actually, that's not true. The old me would have just kept taking advantage. But I like to think the person I'm becoming would make better choices. We talked for another hour, covering many topics we'd avoided for years. Marcus asked about my new photography hobby and seemed genuinely interested in my recent travels. I inquired about his new job and the house they were considering. The conversation felt more balanced and authentic than any we'd had in a very long time. Before he left, Marcus said something that truly moved me. Dad, I don't expect things to go back to the way they were before. Too much has happened, and honestly, the way things were wasn't healthy for either of us. But I hope we can build something new, something based on mutual respect and genuine care, not obligation or expectation. I'd like that very much, I told him sincerely. Over the following months, our relationship began to heal. It wasn't always smooth, old habits occasionally resurfaced on both sides, but there was a fundamental shift in how we related to each other. Marcus and his family moved to a more modest home in a nice neighborhood with excellent public schools. They adjusted their lifestyle to match their new financial reality and, in many ways, seemed happier for it. The most significant change, though, was in Marcus himself. He began checking on me regularly, not because he needed something, but because he genuinely cared about my well-being. When I mentioned in passing that my washing machine was making strange noises, he came over that weekend to look at it and ended up helping me select and install a new one. When I had a minor surgery, he took time off work to drive me to and from the hospital and stayed overnight to make sure I was comfortable. As for me, I continued to enjoy my newfound financial security and freedom. The educational trusts for Emma and Ethan grew steadily, ensuring they would have support for college regardless of their parents' financial situation. I took another photography trip, this time to the Grand Canyon, and had 3 photographs accepted into a local gallery exhibition. On the 1-year anniversary of selling the cabin, I received a surprising text from Marcus. Just wanted to say thank you for the tough love. It was exactly what I needed, even though I couldn't see it at the time. I'm a better man, husband, and father because of it. Later that week, when we were having dinner together, now a monthly tradition, I asked him about the text. I meant every word, he said. Selling the cabin was like ripping off a Band-Aid that was covering a much deeper wound. It hurt like hell at the time, but it forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths about myself. Such as the fact that I'd become the kind of person who would leave his own father stranded on a highway rather than interrupt a football game. He shook his head in evident disgust at his past behavior. I still can't believe I did that. It's so contrary to the values you raised me with. We all make mistakes, I said, more generous now that true remorse had been shown. This was more than a mistake. It was a character failure. He looked at me seriously. But it was also an opportunity to change course before it was too late. If you hadn't taken such a dramatic stand, I might have continued down that path indefinitely. I nodded, acknowledging the truth in his words. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for someone we love is to show them the consequences of their actions. Exactly. He raised his glass in a small toast. To tough love and second chances. I raised my glass in return. To new beginnings. As we continued our meal, I reflected on the journey we'd taken over the past year. The pain of that freezing January night when my son refused to help me had been transformed into something unexpectedly positive, a catalyst for genuine change and the rebuilding of our relationship on healthier terms. Yes, I had sold the vacation property my son used every summer. But in doing so, I had gained something far more valuable than real estate: a renewed relationship with my son based on mutual respect rather than obligation, authentic connection rather than entitlement, and genuine love rather than expectation. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply having the courage to require better treatment from those who should love us the most. In my case, that difficult decision led not to the permanent fracturing of a family, but to its ultimate healing, a resolution far more satisfying than I could have imagined on that cold night when I first decided things needed to change.